Brother Nero, how could you? Hello, everyone, and welcome to a. Let me not talk in that accent. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Heartbreak Heel Turn. This is your lovely and good-looking host, Dr. Heartbreak, of course, as always. Um, this is I'm a little bit giddy right now because I think I just watched the best match, the best wrestling match I've seen all year, and it's definitely between It's definitely between Jeff Hardy and, well, Brother Nero and Matt Hardy at TNA taping last Tuesday. No, I'm joking, of course. But a really big announcement that I did want to start out with was Brock Lesnar's opponent for SummerSlam. We're going to announce that. I'm sure some of you have already heard some of the rumors, but I'm here to kind of confirm the those rumors. And from multiple sources that I've heard and that I've listened to, Brock Lesnar is going to be facing Randy Orton at SummerSlam. That's right, Randy Orton. He's been out for the last, probably 6 to 7, 8 months or so with a shoulder injury, like everyone else was a couple months ago, and he's going to make his big return at SummerSlam against Brock Lesnar. Now, at first, when I had heard that they were going to announce a Brock Lesnar's opponent, I thought it was stupid because then it kind of takes out of the storyline of the whole thing. But the way wrestling is becoming nowadays is not much storyline and things anymore. It's more about the spectacle of a match, like, two big names. The story kind of writes itself, and they kind of, that's the story, is two big names going into a match, and that's how wrestling has been, booked very often for the last couple of years. So that's kind of where they went with this route. I really kind of only saw, people like Randy Orton or like The Rock or like another big name fighting Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam because, one, they needed to have that big match type of feel to people outside of the wrestling world that just know names. So I'm sure people know who Brock Lesnar is, especially after this UFC 200 fight he's going to have against Mark Hunt. And I'm sure the casual, person that doesn't really follow wrestling has heard the name Randy Orton before. So it makes sense to have this match. I understand the whole dynamic behind it. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to take this match and roll with it, because it's going to be pretty interesting to see the dynamic, because we haven't really seen Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar fight maybe ever. When they first came up from OVW back in 2002, Brock Lesnar was kind of strictly on SmackDown and Randy Orton was with Evolution on Raw. So we didn't really see them have a program together. So this match is about 14 years in the making. So like I said, that story writes itself. They don't really need a storyline behind that. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope Randy's 100%. Hopefully Brock Lesnar wins his match against Mark Hunt in UFC 200, because if he loses, it kind of deflates the match a little bit, knowing that, he went out at UFC and lost, and now he's supposed to be the big guy that's supposed to be in this match. Like, it kind of takes the air out of his sails a little bit. So hopefully he gets that victory so that, this feels like an even bigger fight. And it's interesting, the timing as well with the timing of announcing this match, which they're going to do tomorrow on SmackDown. Your boy Heartbreak, he always has the 411. I always got the deets on the low. So for the low, my guy, shout out Chubbs. But at the end of the day, most people are going to find out about this tomorrow at 8 on the USA Network on SmackDown. But I'm letting you know right now. So you got a lot of time to figure this out, to watch the show, and to brag about your friends about how you already know who Brock Lesnar is going to face. You don't have to wait for an announcement. It's interesting as well, like I said, with the timing, because UFC 200 is very close. I don't know the exact day because I don't follow UFC, but at the same time, I'm sure that they're announcing this match so that even more eyes are on Brock Lesnar during the UFC fight, and I'm sure they're going to promote the UFC match as well. So, and it's going to be interesting to see if UFC promotes Brock Lesnar's fight at SummerSlam. I'm sure there had to be some kind of a deal made between the two for him to even be going back and forth like this, because this has never happened before. This is the first time we see a guy go from WWE to UFC, then back to WWE in such a short amount of time. So obviously, there's it's a special occasion for such a special beast, to put it in not so many words. But yeah. So Brock Lesnar's opponent, again, if you're just tuning in, is going to be Randy Orton at SummerSlam. And this is a match that's 14 years in the making, so obviously a lot of people are going to be excited about it. You know, going from there, I just when I wanted to talk about a lot of things today, and one of them was probably the best match I've seen all year. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. And no, it's not the Brother Nero stuff on TNA. Even though, you know what? Let me talk about that first. All right. I don't really watch TNA, but especially because the product has just gotten very trash over the last couple months, couple years, whatever you want to say. But at the same time, I think that Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy, aka Brother Nero, what they're doing right now, the program that they're doing is very good for the company. And now, it's not good for wrestling. It's actually terrible for wrestling, in my opinion. It's terrible for wrestling. It's terrible for the business because it's kind of making a mockery of the whole thing. They had a very good program. They had very good matches, but this last part of it was just a little bit too comical. It was a little bit too satirical for me, being a wrestling fan. But I understand where they're going with it because it brings eyes to the. I mean, look, I watched it. So obviously it's bringing eyes to people who don't normally watch TNA to be like, who is this crazy guy with gray and white and black hair, talking funny to his brother, and then what's going on with this whole thing? It's just an interesting dynamic as far as TNA is concerned, probably the most interesting storyline they've had in the last 10 years. I'm maybe pushing it a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't remember people talking about TNA as much now as they did back then, right? Like right now, I think it's building momentum. I mean, even WWE superstars have been in the mix with this Brother Nero stuff. I saw a tweet the other day from Sasha Banks. She was talking to Bayley and talking about calling Bayley's sister Nero. So it just goes to show you, even WWE superstars are watching TNA, or at least watching this program, just to see what happens between these two guys. And let me tell you, like, I just finished watching, that the end, it was called The Final Deletion. And, it was exactly what I thought it was from TNA, but I can't lie. It was entertaining. And I didn't want to see the end of it. I don't know why. That's the beauty of a great storyline. You might not know why you want to see the conclusion to the story, but I did. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has never maybe watched TNA very often to just want to see what the end of this whole story was. And, for those of you who haven't watched it, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy have a match in their backyard in their hometown of Cameron, North Carolina, kind of to end their entire feud, to see who can have the Hardy name, the Hardy brand. So whoever wins the match has the brand. And it wasn't even really a match, it was more like a soap opera. Even like, we know WWE is kind of like a soap opera with its promos, but the match was a soap opera. Like, it wasn't a match, it was like a bunch of cut scenes of a bunch of moves and a bunch of spots with some demonic music playing in the background, which was cool. Like I said, it was entertaining. But that doesn't mean that, it was pro wrestling, quote unquote, it was sports entertainment. And this is why the debate between sports entertainment and pro wrestling is so, is it the same thing? Is it not the same thing? This Brother Nero stuff is sports entertainment, 100%. This isn't pro wrestling. And if this is what Vince McMahon wants to say, that pro wrestling is dead and sports entertainment is what they're doing now on WWE, then that's where the business is headed eventually. This crazy satirical version of pro wrestling called sports entertainment is what we're going to be headed to, because it's what gets people watching. Now you have a bunch of people that are watching TNA that have never even heard of TNA, or maybe even Matt Hardy or Jeff Hardy. I'm sure a lot of them do know who they are. That's the reason why this is getting popular. But at the same time, you know, you have to realize that you can only take it so far before you start to push the boundaries too much. And I think that's what this did. Um, I mean, physically what they were doing was real because there were some sick spots in this, I don't even want to call it a match. I don't know what to call it. In this confrontation between these two guys, that was crazy. Jeff Hardy had his brother on a ladder, laying flat on a ladder, and climbed a tree above the ring in their backyard that was at least 15 feet high. And he jumped and tried to do a swanton off the tree. And his brother moved out of the way and he landed right on the ladder. And it was just sick. You could see the welts on his back, as time went on. You could see the welts developing on his back from hitting the ladder. And it was just like, ow, like, how does someone take that kind of thing? And you'd think that'd be the sickest thing you'd see all match. But at the very end, excuse me, at the very end of the storyline or of this confrontation, Jeff Hardy, who you think would learn his lesson not to jump off any more high things, had his brother basically knocked out in a sand dune or in a sand pit or whatever. They ventured out from the ring because I guess it's a falls count anywhere. Ventured out from the ring into a sand pit in their backyard, and he was gonna jump off of his logo, which was just precariously perched on the end of this sand dune, which was at least 20 feet high. And he was on the top of it. And somehow Matt Hardy found a way to light it up while he was on top of it and turn it on fire. And it forced Jeff Hardy to jump off of his logo and land directly on his back on the hump of a sand dune. Like, jumping 20 feet directly on your back onto a ring is already hard enough, but doing it on straight ground, straight dirt, that had to hurt. And if he's not injured or if he's not, if his back isn't like Shawn Michaels' 1998 Royal Rumble, then I don't know what, then he's Superman to me, because those were some sick spots that for something that wasn't even a wrestling match, he took them very brutally. And the conclusion of this whole storyline was Brother Nero was defeated and deleted, and Matt Hardy ended up winning. And it was weird because he won because his brother jumped off and basically broke his back on the sand dune, and he pinned him after that. And it was just like, that's it. That was the end. That's the end of the feud, and it kind of makes you want to tune in next week. And I wish they had said something like that, like, oh, tune in next week to TNA, so that people would actually come back and know what it is that they were watching. And nothing like that. It was just like, oh, that's the end. Final deletion. He's gone. So, a great storyline, I think, because I've actually been following this Brother Nero stuff for a little bit less than a month now. So the only TNA storyline I've been following. So, kudos to them. They got my attention for a little while. I don't know what else they're going to do with this stuff. They said this was the end. I doubt it because it's getting so much publicity. Maybe bad publicity because it's so bad that it's good. But, there's no such thing as bad publicity, right? Any publicity is good publicity. I'm sure in TNA's case that's exactly what it is too. So, I venture off from TNA. That's the last time I talk about that for the night. No more talk about Brother Nero or anything like that. Again, if you're just tuning in, I started out the podcast talking about Brock Lesnar and his eventual opponent at SummerSlam, which will be Randy Orton. I've heard from numerous sources online that Randy Orton is going to be his opponent. So that's where that's going. Now, if we want to talk about the real match that I think was the match of the year, and I don't know if you guys even know what I'm talking about, but let me explain. NXT, of course, NXT, right? The best wrestling in the world, in my opinion, NXT. There's two tag teams that are unbelievable down there. The Revival, who are the current tag team champions, Scott Dawson and some Dash Wilder, and American Alpha, Jason Jordan and Chad Gable. And those four guys have put on in my opinion, the match of the year. And I feel like tag teams do not get enough credit as far as how good their matches are because they might seem gimmicky. But at the same time, you got to give credit where credit is due. And this match was just, it was the third match. It was the rubber match of it was a trilogy. And the first match went to the first time they fought NXT Takeover Dallas. American Alpha won the titles. Then they fought again NXT Takeover um, at Takeover wherever it was, and the Revival won their tag titles back. And after that, they figured I figured, okay, they just did that for the sparkle of the night, kind of like when in '98 when Kane won the WWF title from Stone Cold for one night, but then they would get it back. Stone Cold got it back the next night on Raw. So I figured that's what they would do. They would just have Revival win it because they are a great tag team, and then eventually lose it to American Alpha during the final rubber match, the third match. So I figured that's the direction they were going to go with it. And I'll get to the ending later, but from this trilogy to me was like a culmination of just three great, unbelievable matches. And this third one was the best one of all. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match, and it was, and I didn't think they could top the first two because the first two were amazing. They were kind of a toss-up. I couldn't really decide which one was better. I'd probably go with the first one just because it was WrestleMania weekend and the crowd was unbelievable. But this third match, just being at Full Sail University, it didn't matter. It was still amazing. They I would if I had to compare this trilogy, and I'm gonna go there, as far as tag matches go, probably the best trilogy of tag matches ever. I know the Hardys and Edge and Christian had a good. I don't know if it was 3 matches. I don't know if it was a trilogy or if it was 4. I believe it was 4. It might have been a trilogy. I know they had WrestleMania 2000, SummerSlam 2000, and then WrestleMania 17. I'm sure they had some matches in between that. I don't know if they were TLC or triple, but I know they were triple threat. They were triple threat tag matches, so it was 6 people instead of just 4. But as far as the trilogy goes, I think 2 tag teams. This is the best, and it's the tag team trilogy equivalent of a Steamboat and Flair trilogy. And I went there, yeah. Steamboat and Flair back in the 1980s. Their trilogy was probably the most legendary trilogy of all time. Maybe even a CM Punk and Samoa Joe, definitely on that level. If not, definitely that level or a little bit higher than that. But Flair and Steamboat, those 2 trilogies are like the 2 top trilogies I can think of. And this tag team trilogy between American Alpha and the Revival, definitely the tag equivalent of those, because the work that they put in and the spots that they had and things I've never, and it's tough to say that in 2016, spots that you have never seen before be executed so flawlessly. And that's exactly what you've seen with these with the tag matches between these guys. The Revival and American Alpha. I don't care if you have the network. I applaud you if you have it, and I tell you to go get it if you don't. But if you can't afford it or you just don't feel like paying for it, then look up American Alpha and the Revival on YouTube, on wherever it is you want to look it up at, and just watch the first one at Dallas, the second one. But and this third one's probably not going to be online for a couple days because this match just happened tonight. But this third one was the best of all. And in the 5-star matches, man, it's always 5-star matches. It's always hard for me to be like, this is going to be a 5-star match because they're very rare and they come few and far between. And I think with a 5-star match, the storyline really has to be gravitating for it to be a match like that. The last 5-star match was, as we all know in WWE, was CM Punk and John Cena, 2011 Money in the Bank. And that storyline, to this day, I still go back and just watch that storyline and how it unfolded because it was so interesting and intriguing to me. And I have a story where, I was at a friend's house one time and I was on the computer looking up matches. And at this point, I wasn't watching wrestling, and this was like maybe 2012. I had stopped watching wrestling, and everyone knows who John Cena is, though. And I had heard things about a guy named CM Punk, but I didn't really know him that well. But I was on YouTube looking up random stuff, and for some reason, it recommended me to look up, this promo between Cena and CM Punk setting up their Money in the Bank match. And I'm watching this promo, and I'm watching all this stuff happening. And I remember, and I'm with like three other people, and we're watching it on this, and none of us are questioning why we're watching wrestling. We're just watching it, and it was just so, it was so intriguing to be sucked into the storyline in the blink of an eye. And when the promo ended, all of a sudden my ride came, so I had to leave. And as I'm leaving, my friends go, "No, wait. I want to know what happens at the end of the storyline. I want to know who wins the match. I want to know if he leaves with the belt or if," and it was so amazing to me. It was like, wow, wrestling really can you know, still be cool, and people can still be sucked into their storylines. And just, and that was the last 5-star match. I mean, they fucked it up at the end. They fucked up his whole push, but we all know that. So I'm not gonna get into that. It's not why, I started this. That's not why I decided to do this today, to talk about that. But, as far as 5-star matches go, I'm not going to go as far as saying it was a 5-star match. It definitely should be rated better than the first two, because obviously, being the third match of the trilogy, the storyline is further developed. Therefore, people are more invested into it. So it makes sense. But at the end of the day, I believe the 2 out of 3 falls was a better fixation for the casual fan at the end of the day. So hopefully they continue with this. I don't know if another match would be in the works, because the trilogy just sounds so great. I don't know what the four I don't know what you would call 4 in a row. The trilogy sounds good, maybe a quartet, or I don't know, but it sounds stupid. So let's just stick with the trilogy. It was great. We'll stick with that. So that was basically all of NXT. Honestly, there was a match at the beginning with Bayley and Alexa Bliss, and I'm not gonna lie, that match was actually very good. And I do a wrestler of the week at the end of these shows, and I was very tempted to give it to Alexa Bliss, because she did the one thing that's very hard to do, and that's to put over your opponent and lose, but at the same time putting yourself over. And it was funny, because in the middle of the match, it almost seemed like a double turn. People were kind of turning on Bayley a little bit to see, who's this Alexa Bliss character. She's phenomenal in the ring. No, not to steal AJ Styles' thunder, but she is, and I definitely think she deserves, all the praise that she's getting in NXT, and every bit of opportunity that she gets. She deserves it, because the match that she put on with Bayley today was just, even though the American Alpha match, like I said, was the best match probably I've seen all year, that match was a good warm up for it. It warmed the crowd up very well, and it wasn't boring at all. It was quite the contrary. So that was NXT for you. I wish I had as good of things to say about Raw and SmackDown. I'll barely talk about those. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is the Heartbreak Heel Turn. I am your gracious host, Heartbreak. And just to let you guys know, if you didn't hear in the beginning, Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam will face Randy Orton. And I know that the announcement doesn't come until later on in the day today at like 8 o'clock or so on the USA Network. But your boy Heartbreak has some connection, so I know it's Randy Orton. If you don't believe me, you can wait and watch it till later. But I'm letting you know right now, so you don't have to put yourself through the pain of watching SmackDown. I think, obviously, when it goes live on July 19th in Worcester, Massachusetts, which I'm going to, and I'm excited for it. Excuse me again. But that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is, after it does go live, I think it's gonna be a must-watch show because of the fact that the rosters will be divided. But as of right now, I think you can just skip SmackDown because there was actually a match on Raw on Monday that was between Dean Ambrose, and it was promoted as champion versus champion. Dean Ambrose against the WWE World Heavyweight Champion against the Intercontinental Champion, The Miz. And it would have been cool to see that match. Champion versus champion doesn't happen very often. It's always cool to see. But there were two things wrong about that match. One, Dean Ambrose and The Miz aren't particularly over like, as far as strong champions. They're not really booked as strong champions. The Miz is kind of booked as kind of a weasel, and Dean Ambrose kind of just got the belt, and he only got it because of Money in the Bank, so he's not really looking that strong of a champion. So the match isn't even like a must-see match. And we've seen The Miz and Dean Ambrose before, just them two not as champions. So I think it was a little bit too early to do that. Obviously, I think they expect Dean Ambrose. I expect Dean Ambrose not to be champion very long. So he's not going to have many champion versus champion matches because I don't think he's going to be the champion for very long. But that was the first problem. Those two guys aren't really booked to be very strong. So it wasn't very like, oh my gosh, two titans are battling it out like Shawn and Brett at SummerSlam 92 or, something like that. SummerSlam or Survivor Series 92, sorry. And the second problem with this match was we saw it already. And when I said we saw it recently, I'm not talking about like a month ago. I mean, 5 days before they did this exact same match on SmackDown. Why they repeated it again for Raw, I have no idea. They probably figured no one watches SmackDown, which I should probably stop watching now because they did that. It's kind of like an FU to everyone that watches SmackDown. Like, yeah, you watch SmackDown, we're just going to put the same thing on Raw. So, it doesn't really matter. You're watching SmackDown for no reason, yeah. Yeah, F you guys. Just wait till it goes live. That's kind of disrespectful to me. I think, it was kind of like, I just saw this match and it was the main event of SmackDown and it was the opener of Raw or, somewhere in the middle, whatever. And, and that's another thing, a champion versus champion match, you'd figure would be the main event, but they're so not over. They're not such strong champions that it was in the mid card. That's kind of embarrassing. That kind of shows you right there the state of the champions on currently in WWE. And hopefully that changes soon. I think Battleground will be a grounds for a lot of change. And one of them, in my opinion, is going to be the new world champion. As far as other things on Raw, there was a champion versus champion match. It was the July 4th Independence Day version of Raw. So, there was a lot of hoopla involved with that and a lot of people coming out with their independence gear and pro USA and things like that. Titus O'Neil had a match with Rusev, came out in his best Uncle Sam outfit, and it just looked terrible on him because he's supposed to be a big, strong guy, and he comes out looking like a guy you see on the corner, promoting tires or something like that because of his goofy Uncle Sam outfit. And then he proceeds to lose to Rusev again. It's just, why? And then, they had a funny one. They had a funny version with Social Outcast coming dressed up as like, Minutemen and things like that, and losing to Enzo and Cass pretty handily. I was just a little bit concerned because I figured I didn't want Enzo and Cass to be in a feud with the Social Outcast because I felt like they had a higher ceiling than that, as I'm sure a lot of other people felt as well. And, we were right. They did later on Raw, they actually interfered and helped out John Cena in their promo with the Club, and the Club came out, and I gotta give it to them, man. I think they're so much better together than they were apart. I think they're just like, I think if they're gonna split the brands and have two separate world titles, I think AJ Styles is a shoo-in for being champion, whichever brand he goes to, because I think he can definitely hold his own, and especially with the Club behind him, he's a revolutionary as far as his in-ring work already, and he's showing that he can hold his own on his promos. And this was probably his best, in my opinion, his best promo he's had since he's come here on Raw. And it was with the club, and they were just talking about how they were going to beat up John Cena, and they were saying, yeah, every time, what are you going to do tomorrow? I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to beat up John Cena. Like, it was very entertaining. It was very funny. And Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson too. Those guys have pretty good comedic timing when they're with their friends, I assume, with the camaraderie that they have being in Japan together and the Bullet Club. They just know how to push each other the right way to get the best out of each other, and that's always great to see chemistry from backstage come out on camera. And I think they need to do that more. I think it's been successful so far. We see that happen with the New Day. We just saw Seth Rollins coming out saying that when he was with the Shield, that was the best time he's ever had as a wrestler anywhere. And we can all agree that the Shield stuff that they were doing was amazing. So, and now, you see that with the club, the guys that were legitimate friends backstage, coming out on camera and being great on the mic. And hopefully they do that more, because it's entertaining to watch. And I think that the whole show can benefit from things like that. Obviously you got to do it with people that are good at it, but you can't just have people that are random friends backstage, come out on live television. But, I'm sure, they can figure it out, but hopefully they do that a little bit more, because it is fun to watch, and it seems like a successful formula so far. So, but yeah, so they came out, had their little funny promo, and then proceeded to beat John Cena up again. But this time Enzo and Cass came and decided to help Cena, because apparently no one else, I guess they haven't known Cena long enough to know that he does bury people. And so they're willing to help for the time being. But a lot of the promo that the club was talking about was trying to explain that nobody in the back likes John Cena, so nobody came to help him every time he got beat up. And obviously it was setting up for someone to come out and help him. But at the same time, they picked the right guys. I think they picked the right guys, definitely, because one, they're new, so in storyline it makes sense, because they don't know Cena like that very well. And two, they're trying to bring them over. They're trying to get them even more over, and how better to do that than to put them with put them with the face of the company against the biggest heel faction in the company. They're just dropping them right in a great position, and I hope they take advantage of it. Other things that happened on Raw. Seth Rollins had a match with Dolph Ziggler, and it was the basis on the match was because Ziggler wanted to show that he was just as good as Rollins, and it was a good match. It was all right. Dean Ambrose was on commentary, and it made it very funny, so that was a good thing. They brought Vicky Guerrero out, and this whole thing with past GMs and making fun of them, I'm not much of a fan of. I kind of feel bad for them, especially Teddy Long. When Teddy Long came out and did what he had to do, I don't know how much he paid him, but they had to pay him a lot, because they would have had to pay me a lot, or I wouldn't have done it, because that was very embarrassing to see what they had reduced Teddy Long to. And I've listened to podcasts with him on it, and he doesn't seem very mad about that whole situation. I mean, he got paid, and I'm sure he got paid very well, so he's not very angry about the situation. At the end of the day, he came in for a show, did his job, and left. And I'm sure that's how, but they didn't do that with John Laurinaitis, and they did it with Vicky Guerrero today, but they didn't do it as bad as Teddy as well. So after the whole Teddy thing, I was just not a fan of any of them coming out at all. So, I'm not even going to bother with that whole thing. The New Day had another promo coming out and basically making fun of the Wyatts the week before on Raw. So they come out now, and the Wyatts invited them to their complex over in the middle of West Bubble, bleh, And this is probably the most intriguing storyline that they've had all year. And it kind of tugs on your heartstrings, man. Uh, it's sad because we might see the end of the New Day, and I know some people are very happy to see that. Um, I myself am not, because it was one of the more entertaining things of the past 2 years, and it was one of the only reasons why I was watching Raw for for a couple months, just because of the New Day promos. They were kind of carrying the show themselves for a while there, and it would just be sad to see them separate the way it is, because the way it's looking right now, Xavier Woods is he's not really feeling this whole Wyatt thing, and he doesn't want to go against them. But Big E and Kofi are very up for the challenge, and there's this little thing that apparently Bray Wyatt knows about Xavier, and he's very reluctant to confront the Wyatt family. So he said, I saw a backstage interview on their YouTube page, and he said that he would go to the complex with his brothers, but he doesn't like the decision that they're doing. And I don't think this is leading to them having Xavier join the Wyatts or anything like that. I think this is just kind of having Xavier slowly separate and create a character on his own, and separate from the New Day, because we all know Kofi had a very successful career on his own. Big E was Intercontinental Champion on his own. Even though he didn't have much of a personality, he was just a big, strong guy who was the backup to Dolph Ziggler at the time. But Xavier was kind of the odd man out. He wasn't really very established in WWE as a legitimate wrestler, and those stupid shoes that he wears doesn't do him any favors. But nonetheless, I think they owe it to him, with the greatness he's done on the New Day, on the mic, and the ideas he's come up with, to give him a shot at being a great singles wrestler, which I think he can be very good at, because even though I said I wasn't going to bring TNA up again, he was on TNA, and he was a very good solo wrestler on TNA. So I'm sure that will and on NXT as well. So I'm sure that will translate. I'm sure that, I'm sure he hasn't lost a step at all. He's a very young guy. So I just want to see him get a chance at a singles chance of competing, and not getting lost in the translation of Big E and Kofi, who are by far, the two biggest cogs in the New Day. And obviously without Xavier, it doesn't feel the same, because I remember when he got hurt for a month, they did a pay-per-view without him. It might have been Hell in the Cell, if I'm correct. They did it without Xavier, and it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like the same New Day. It felt kind of like, oh, good thing Xavier is going to come back, because if it was just these two guys, this bit wouldn't work. And it's true, it wouldn't work, which is why, since we already seen that for the very short time that it was happening, to see that if he separates now, it's kind of like, no, we don't want that to happen. Or, I mean, either way, either side of the fence that you're on, you're still emotionally invested in the New Day, whether you hate them or whether you like them, which is the point. You care about them. It's better than not caring, which is why this is happening. So, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with them after this. I don't really see them kind of teasing this breakup and then them not to do it without any repercussions. So obviously, after Battleground, things aren't going to be the same with the New Day. So we'll see where it goes from there. We'll see if it's even the match that they have is even for the tag titles. I doubt it, but it's going to be an interesting and very, very interesting pay-per-view, I can say, at least. The rest of Raw, I know I didn't bring this up, but the beginning of Raw was actually very cool to me. They had a potluck. I don't know if they do this very often, because I don't really watch the 4th of July episodes. And I had to catch up to watch this one, because obviously I was out doing regular things, watching fireworks like regular people. I wasn't watching Raw. But they did have an opening food fight segment, or an opening segment with, I kind of spoiled it, but an opening segment where they were all eating like, their Thanksgiving, 4th of July meals with, like, the whole locker room really, and they were all doing their separate things, and it was cool to see them, separate people from their personalities. And the New Day was just kind of in a corner goofing off. You had Apollo Crews and Cesaro in an arm wrestling match, like, little things like that. And then the Miz comes out being the dick that he is, and then a food fight starts to happen, and it was just cool, just to see those guys have fun and not be under so much pressure, because I'm sure there wasn't that much pressure to be in a food fight. And they all seemed to enjoy it, even at the end when they were all leaving, walking out of the shot. They all were smiles on their face with mashed potato in their mouth and on their hair and everything. It seemed like they all enjoyed themselves. So it was good to see that. It was good to see that they had a chance to be on TV without having so much pressure on them. And that was fun. I know some people don't really like that kind of stuff because they're in to watch a wrestling show and not to watch, stupid shenanigans. But it was cool for me to see. And that's my opinion. So it is what it is. There was I don't even want to talk about this, but the main event was a 16-man match or something like that between Team USA and Team International Alliance. The people on the USA team, I'm not even gonna name. Well, I'll try, because there's 16 people, so I don't know if I can remember all of them. But it was Swagger, Mark Henry, Big Show, Kane, Zack Ryder, and that's all that was important. And on Team Alliance, Sami Zayn, all the Canadians, Sami Zayn, Chris Jericho, Kevin Owens. Then there was Cesaro, the Swiss man, the 3 Mexicans, Alberto Del Rio, and the 2 Lucha Dragons. And I think that's 8 right there. And it, the match was whatever. People, it was like, oh, just kind of do your spot, and because it was an elimination match, so you can imagine there were very stupid eliminations in it that I won't even get into. But at the end, which is the important part, obviously, the end of the show, Team USA won. But how they won was Zack Ryder, who has been jobbing out to people left and right on Raw, SmackDown, 2 times a week, to whoever it is, Baron Corbin, Sheamus, whoever it was. He gets the victory with the elbow, his top rope elbow drop, and he gets the victory. And I was like, wow, is this going to be another push for Zack Ryder, or is it going to be, he gets his moment again, kind of like at WrestleMania, and then they just kind of crap on him for the rest of the time. But for you all that haven't seen SmackDown yet, and I have, again, I have the hookup. Like I said, I know what it is. But for people that haven't seen, that are going to watch SmackDown later on tonight, Zack Ryder was one of my more favorite parts of SmackDown. He went up against Sheamus, and he comes out. And if you listened to this podcast before, you would know that I said that I hate. I think Zack Ryder's a great wrestler. He's tried really hard to get himself over, but his theme song sucks. And I always wanted it to be something different. And guess what? If you tune into SmackDown, now that's a reason to tune into SmackDown, because I already told you who Brock Lesnar is going to fight. But if you want to hear Zack Ryder's new theme song, which is similar to his current one, but it's way better. It's just better. Just a better feel for his character, a better feel for, for you to get hyped yourself. You couldn't really get hyped to that stupid other song that he had. And I just think that it's a way better song, and that alone is the only reason for you to tune into SmackDown tonight. So, but you heard it here first. Zack Ryder with his new theme song, bigger news than Brock Lesnar's opponent. And again, if you guys didn't hear Brock Lesnar's opponent, I don't like repeating myself, but I see different people, coming in to watch the podcast, obviously. So, but Brock Lesnar's opponent at SummerSlam is confirmed to be Randy Orton. Now, you never know what WWE does within the next 24 hours. Maybe they've heard this podcast and they're gonna go, you know what? We're not gonna let Heartbreak break the news. He's not gonna break our hearts like he does with everyone else and break our news. So we're gonna change it. We're not gonna have Randy Orton fight Brock anymore. They could do that. SmackDown was already taped, and the segment that they're gonna do for Brock's part isn't on the show. It's gonna be like during the commercial breaks and stuff. So it's subject to change. But as of right now, it's Randy Orton, and that's what it's going to be, and that's what I'm saying. So you take my word for it. That's who will be a part of that whole thing. So we transitioned from this new theme song that we heard to Darren Young and his long, over boring segments with Bob Backlund. Now, I don't know if I dreamed this. I don't think I dreamed that. I think I might have seen it at a live event or watched, a taping of a live event or whatever. Someone recorded it. And I actually saw Darren Young in the ring with Bob Backlund. And Bob Backlund was actually like his active manager. He was out with him doing things with Darren Young. And I mean, this is live, but that was pretty rude. Anyway, he's out doing things with Darren Young. He's actually going to be in the ring with him. Now, obviously, again, this is going to be live event stuff. So it hasn't been on TV yet, but you can look forward to Darren Young actually having Bob Backlund in his corner during his matches. And an interesting thing, for this promo that they had on SmackDown, I believe, was that you're going to see tonight, was Bob Backlund gave him the okay to use his finisher, the crossface chicken wing, because he had a finisher called the gut check, but he didn't have a submission. So Bob Backlund thought it'd be okay to give him the crossface chicken wing. So there's another dynamic in that whole frenzy that we want to call a friendship between those two. So it'd be interesting to see, like, if they ever did a segment on how they even became friends in the first place. But I'm thinking too far. I'm thinking too logical there. Things are never that logical with that place. It's like I said, if you want to see that Zack Ryder theme song, SmackDown is the place to be tonight. But other than that, I've already broke all the news to you guys, so SmackDown's not really going to be too watchable. And, I don't like saying that, but, at the same time, they've done this to people that habitually watch SmackDown. They've replayed things that they've put on SmackDown on Raw the next week, or things that they had to hide on Raw they're going to put on SmackDown. And it's kind of a slap to the face to people that tried to take their time out of their day to watch SmackDown. So, yeah. Unless you want to see Zack Ryder's new theme song, I wouldn't recommend you watching it. Now there's another segment that I want to do. That I want to do for this show to kind of to wrap up the show. It's a segment called Top 5, and this top 5 is actually going to be between. This top 5 is going to be about the top 5 wrestlers that have been underutilized within the past year or so. I don't want to go too far back because then it just gets very muddy. So I want to stay current and keep it in the past year. So this is Heartbreak's Top 5 segment.
Top 5, no debating. Top 5, top 5, top 5.
And my number 5 person is a person that's actually not even in the company anymore. And it's Damien Mizdow, whatever you want to call him. He was released not too long ago, but at the same time, he was a guy that I felt like, he did his job, to the extent that they wanted him to do it and above and beyond. And it was just a shame to see him, get released after getting over with the crowd. Every time he came out, people were cheering the hell out of him, and they probably just didn't know what to do with him, so they released him. And he's a very sad story of a person that was very underutilized in the time that he did have. Now, he's the only guy on this list that is that isn't a part of the company anymore. So everyone else, they still have a chance to potentially do more with them. Number 4 is Dolph Ziggler. And I know some of you are saying Dolph Ziggler's on TV every week. You know, he's facing big guys. He just faced Seth Rollins on Raw, and yeah, you know, I get all that, but I feel like Dolph Ziggler actually has a lot of talent and he has a lot of love for the business. So I feel like he wants to be great. And he's never really gotten a chance to do that. You know, he was kind of like put in the spot that CM Punk was put in when he first, because you can say, yeah, he was a world champion, but so was CM Punk. And not talking about the CM Punk that won the title at Money in the Bank that kind of solidified his main event status. I'm talking about the CM Punk that won after winning the Money in the Bank match and then cashing in his belt to be champion. And this has happened to a lot of people that were Money in the Bank winners. You know, they were kind of mid-card guys that they wanted to help put them over and to get them into the main event spot. And it worked for some people. You know, it worked for Edge. It worked for Seth Rollins, I guess. You know, Dean Ambrose. You know, the jury's still out on that. We don't really know. But a guy like CM Punk, when he was first given the heavyweight title, it didn't feel like he was world champion. Like his matches were mid-card in the pay-per-views, and he was just kind of a paper champion sort of. And then he didn't even get a chance to lose it. They kind of just stripped him of it with some fake injury. And this is how I felt with Dolph Ziggler when he won the world title. Yes, his pop when he won the championship was amazing, but at the same time, it wasn't, you know, he didn't have a very memorable run with that belt. And since then, he's only had, you know, romantic encounters, and that's been his whole storyline, is that he's, you know, romance and stuff. And you can't be successful just in this industry with just romance storylines. You know, you can use it as a platform, but that's all you can use it as a platform. And after that, you need to venture off into more you know, modern and you know, sensical storylines, not, you know, stupid puffy relationship crap. That's crap. And that's all we've seen out of Ziggler as far as storyline goes, besides this whole Baron Corbin thing that he's done. And, you know, it was funny because, you know, I was watching his match with Seth Rollins. You know, I was watching it with someone and they were saying, yeah, Dolph Ziggler hasn't won a match in like 3 years. Like, that's how it's felt. He hasn't won a match in forever. He had just beat Baron Corbin at the pay-per-view a couple weeks ago. And it doesn't feel like that, though, because he, you know, he doesn't have much of an impact anymore. And I feel like they can do so much more with him. And I've dwelled on Dolph Ziggler too long, but I feel like he has a lot of talent and he can potentially, you know, figure it out and be something of significance to the product. And hopefully they can figure out what that is with him. Number 3 of the most underrated wrestlers on my top 5 is Xavier Woods, or underutilized. I'm sorry, not underrated, but underutilized. I mean, you can put him in that in both categories. Underutilized, you know, again, not as far as being on TV, because the New Day are on TV every week on both shows most of the time. And, you know, that's not what I mean. Again, you know, what I mean is that I feel like he has so much more to bring to the table than his goofy shoes and his trombone. I feel like he's a very good wrestler in the ring, and he can, you know, based on some of the things that he's doing recently, especially with this whole Wyatt thing, he can potentially hold a storyline on his own. And I just hope to see that he gets an opportunity to prove himself as a singles competitor, or, you know, as a singles guy, hopefully. I can remember seeing him in a match way back when the New Day were still heels. It was a part of John Cena's U.S. title match that he had every night on Raw. And he went against Xavier Woods, and I was so excited because I thought that Xavier would get a chance to be singles champion and win the U.S. belt with some stupid shenanigans from the New Day. It didn't happen, But I thought it would have been cool because the New Day were freshly hot. They were so hot at the time. I mean, they still are, but they were heel tag team champions, and I figured they'd give Xavier the U.S. title because kind of like what they did with Dean Ambrose and the Shield. They just kind of gave him the U.S. title to give him some legitimacy so that he could prove himself over time. Dean Ambrose didn't do that with the U.S. title. He kind of brought it down because he didn't even defend it. But I felt like Xavier Woods being with the New Day, he would have made it more relevant. And knowing him, he has so many ideas. I'm sure he would have came up with something interesting to do with that belt. But alas, he didn't get a chance. I'm sure he'll have an opportunity, hopefully in the future, and that's why he's on this list, because I hope he does have an opportunity to hold a singles belt, because I think he can be it can be very beneficial for all parties involved. Now, number 2 is controversial on this list on the top 5 most underutilized people, and number 2 on this list is Brock Lesnar. That's right, mayor of Suplex City, and if you really think about it, it makes sense because this guy was the most over guy in the company. And I don't know if I can say that now. Maybe I think that might still be the case. But the fact that, he comes for the big shows, which is cool. And, it's the big fight feel, and he's over and he comes for special occasions. It's cool to see that. But at the same time, it kind of takes some of the luster out of it because of the fact that he only shows he only shows up on certain shows, and it kind of like his, especially if the times that he does show up aren't memorable, then it kind of brings him down. Like the last time we seen him, he was in his match with Dean Ambrose. Excuse me. He was in his match with Dean Ambrose at WrestleMania, and that match was, very boring. He kind of just almost just found a long way to squash Dean Ambrose in that WrestleMania match, and it wasn't very memorable. And because of that, he's kind of lost some of the wind under his sails because of that. And now his return to SummerSlam, they're just gonna bring him back on a big match basis instead of having a storyline behind his whole thing, because they just tried the storyline thing with Dean and it didn't work out. So they're just gonna go, all right, we're just gonna go down the route of big fight feel, and that's because he's not on TV very often. And even I know examples of guys that couldn't wrestle or that weren't on TV but still found a way to, whether it was do a segment from their home, via satellite. How many times did we see that back in the day with The Rock when he was filming his movies? It's The Rock via satellite, or Shawn Michaels or Stone Cold when his neck wasn't the best of health. We saw that a lot, and it wouldn't kill Brock that much to understanding that he's in his UFC mode and doing his UFC thing, to take 5 minutes out of his time to have Paul Heyman fly out to wherever he is, and have Paul Heyman have him stand in the back looking menacing, and have Paul Heyman cut a promo via satellite, just to keep Brock in the intertwined with the product. Having him gone for so long and to just keep coming back and forth, that formula has never been successful. And the only reason why it worked at WrestleMania 31 and it culminated in such a great match was, one, because it had a big fight feel and the match delivered, and two, because Brock was the champion and it was for the belt. But having Brock not have the belt, or not going after the belt, it only seems legitimate for him to do that. So when he's not doing that, it already takes some of the luster out of the match. So then not only having that, but then not having him deliver, as well as him not showing up very often, is bringing him lower and lower and lower as being over. And it's tough. It's not, it's a part-time thing, I understand. But when you have to say that your most over guy is a guy that's part-time, that right there just shows, that right there is a big fat problem, in my opinion. I feel like it's not very good for your most over guy to be a part-time wrestler and for him to only show up for the big match feels, especially if he's not champion. You know, I get back in the day, Bruno Sammartino only wrestled once a month. He was champion and he was selling out Madison Square Garden because they were anticipating his next fight. Not many people are anticipating Brock Lesnar's next fight. They're probably happy to see it, but they're not waiting on hands and feet for it like they would have been a year ago because he's not as over. And even saying that now is saying that, Brock isn't as over as he was. He's probably still the most popular guy in the company, depending on how you're going to bring him back, But, as far as with the fans, he's probably the most popular guy, maybe aside from Dean Ambrose, but he's not even all that popular. So that's number 2, Brock Lesnar, on my top 5 most underutilized guys. And my number 1 actually isn't a wrestler. Well, it is a wrestler, but it's wrestlers, plural. And it was the League of Nations. Now, this is funny to me. It's funny to say, but I was a huge fan of them. And not a huge fan of them winning against the New Day at WrestleMania. I was a huge fan of their potential. And what I never understood about their whole thing was if they knew they were going to give Sheamus the belt eventually because he won Money in the Bank, why didn't they start this whole thing before he beat? Because they didn't start this whole League of Nations thing until after Sheamus became champion. And it kind of just seemed like, oh, they're only doing it because he's champion. Then once Roman beats him, it's kind of like, all right, these guys are just an afterthought now. But I thought they had a lot of potential with them because those are guys that were, all 4 of them were very legitimate. 1, they were very entertaining separately. So having them together, they were all separately, they were all, like I said, legitimate, and they were entertaining separately. So imagine together if they had the time and the time and the place on TV to come out and just be themselves, or be those 4 guys from different countries with their different personalities, but coming together to be a League of Nations. It's just a cool concept to me. Their theme song was awesome. I think they just kind of had it in their minds that they were going to be temporary and that was it. They didn't really think about it long term. And I felt like it was something that could have been cool, and I wanted to see it. I felt like it was something that could have prospered further than it did. And unfortunately, it didn't. And the culmination of that whole thing, to me, was at WrestleMania, actually, when the New Day came out in their big old cereal box dressed up as Saiyans, Super Saiyans, and the League of Nations just came out to their music. And I thought, at the very least, when they came out, because I love their theme song, I thought at the very least, when they came out, they were going to at least have their flags on their backs to represent their nations at WrestleMania. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Represent the country that you're from at the biggest wrestling show of the year and just have your flag and come out with that. They didn't even do that. They just came out. And it was so, and then they come out and they win the match, but they still get buried at the end by the legends, and it's just like there was so much potential with them, and it was so unfortunate that, even though they were heels and people didn't like them because they were bad guys. It wasn't because they weren't good. If you go back and listen to them, people didn't want to see Sheamus as champion. So I can see why that he was getting such heat, and they were just people were so deplored to see them together. But they were really good. They were very good at their job, which was having people hate them, and they were good at that. And the reward for being good at what you do is to get broken up. Just ask Damien Sandow, I guess. That's my top 5. Kind of left it on a sour note there, but thank you again, guys, for listening. It's pretty late or early here, depending on your perspective. But I promise you guys that later in the week I'll go into the mailbag and pull out some, because I have some interesting emails that I did want to talk about, but I'm not going to have time to talk about them right now. But again, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it. Especially, at this hour, I did have a lot of people listening, so I really appreciate that. Um, Heartbreak has many more to go. Hopefully, Battleground is something that is going to be very memorable. But for right now, enjoy SmackDown if you decide to watch it tonight, just for Zack Ryder's theme song. And hopefully, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Positive vibes only. Heartbreak out.